This is my 2017 KTM 300 XCW, and it's one of the best KTM two-strokes I've ever had. I've been wanting to make a video to kind of put my setup as far as this bike goes out on the internet and just kind of get some feedback and see what people think. There's a lot of information out there, and I just wanted to share with what I've come up with since September that seems to work the best on this 300. For 2017, I went in a different direction and went back to the PDS suspension for the rear end. And I did this just because from a maintenance standpoint, it's super easy to change the Heim joint bearings on this as opposed to doing linkage bearings. And I've always liked the way that the PDS suspension performed. Now, I don't ride that much motocross anymore, and I typically am just riding single track enduro trail, and I really feel that that's where the PDS suspension shines. I feel like you get a lot better feedback from the rear end, what it's doing and where it is on the trail. Going over logs and rough terrain, you don't have to worry about hitting linkage on anything. And I really have always been a fan of the PDS suspension. Now up front, I went with a cone valve fork that I've had for years, a setup that I've been running for a long time, and it's something that I'm comfortable with. And that's really one of the, I'd say, the biggest suspension modification that I made. WP Factory Service has valved the forks and the shock on this bike, and I've got it where it's working great. And the stock rear shock has been phenomenal with just a revalve. And I would recommend the PDS platform to just about anybody. If you're racing motocross or racing the GNCCs, it's probably not going to be the best for what you're doing. But if you're just a trail rider that is maybe racing enduros or likes riding technical terrain, you can't go wrong with the PDS suspension. On the rear shock, I ended up going one spring rate stiffer, and I put a straight rate spring on. So I weigh about 175 pounds, and I put a 6'3" rear spring on it, and it just makes the bike a little bit firmer, and I can get the right sag numbers for my body weight. As far as power goes, I really haven't made too many modifications. I keep a logbook so that I can log all my notes, and that's something that I recommend doing if you're doing testing on your own. I have the stock pipe and silencer on right now. I was running an FMF system, but I crashed and dented up the exhaust pipe really bad, and so I haven't replaced it yet. But as far as power characteristics goes between the two, the FMF seemed to be a little bit stronger but smoother power. And what I have on right now, I've got a silencer that I cut down and made an SX length, and it gives a more throttle response right off the bottom. But there are times where it's too snappy and too quick, and I find myself making mistakes with it. But the stock pipe and silencer is a really great combination. They made the stock pipe a lot more durable than in the previous years. So, you know, if you've got a stock pipe and silencer, I would just say run it until you ruin it, and then go get an FMF. For jetting, I run a 60-to-1 ratio with Motorex Premix. I run a 37.5 Pilot, a 4373 needle in the middle, a 450 main, and I have my air screwed about 1.5 to 2 turns out, and the bike runs great. I can run here in Dallas at about 300 feet elevation. I can run that same jetting from here to West Texas. It's about 3,000 feet in elevation, and really only have to make adjustments to the air screw. So that's what my jetting setup is. The bike runs very smooth. I've installed a V-Force 4 reed cage recently, and that just helped strengthen the power a little bit. I didn't have any issues with my stock reed cage. I just had quite a bit of time on my bike and had the opportunity to try a V-Force 4, and so I wanted to put it in and see what it did. And I was really impressed with the improved throttle response and more bottom end that it gave the bike. For power valve settings, I've used the stock spring and also the red power valve spring. I end up going back to the stock spring because I feel I can be more aggressive on the bike and it delivers a smoother power. With the red power valve spring, it's fun to ride when I'm play riding and goofing around. When I'm racing, I make more mistakes. I'll either, have the front end come up out of a corner and have to chop the throttle, or just find myself not being as precise and as smooth as I am with the stock power valve spring. And that's something I would encourage you to do, is sometimes not always the loudest and hardest hitting setup is going to be the fastest. A bike that you can ride all day long aggressively and smoothly is the setting that I would go for all the time. Handlebars, I'm running a Renthal 996. It's a bar bend that I've been running for probably 10 years. I've got the KTM SXS triple clamps, I believe, that are made by X-Trig, and they're the stock 22mm offset, and I I have the handlebars mounted on the KTM, the PDHS handlebar mounting system. That's another accessory that I've been using for many years, and it just makes your, in really hard hits and square edge stuff, it just takes some of that harshness out of your wrists and is absorbed in those handlebar mounts. I run a Moose Racing solid rear rotor. I've always run solid rotors just to increase pad life. It's a pretty cheap investment, and you will double to triple the life of your pads, especially if you find yourself in a mud run. For sprockets, I run a Moose Racing 51 tooth sprocket. The stock gearing's a 1350 on these bikes, and I went to a 1351 just so that I basically throw away first gear and then use second and third the majority of the time. Second in tighter trail, and then I'll use third in the more flowy open stuff. I've been amazed at how good this bike will pull third in even some tight trail, and then how long that gear lasts in the fast stuff, where I can just leave it in third and go corner to corner on the gas and not have to worry about shifting. For tires, I run the Maxxis SI front and rear pretty much everywhere. I run bibs because I don't want to get flats. And other than that, I've put a G2 throttle tube. They've got this adapter that you can run the old style Domino throttle housing, which I feel is a really strong unit. And so I went with that on my bike with the anodized orange throttle tube. I put a thinner base gasket on this bike when I did a top end not too long ago, just to freshen things up, and wanted to try it. And the thinner base gasket, it gave it more bottom end, but it didn't pull as long as it did in the stock form, which I did not like. I really liked how far the bike would pull in the RPM range in stock form. And with a thinner base gasket, I ended up putting a 300 SXS ignition, and it gave me back that top end that I lost while still getting to keep that good grunty bottom end power. This bike has been a blast to ride. The electric start is great. The kickstand's great. I love having a headlight and taillight and going fast with that because people aren't used to seeing it. And one comment that I get the most at the races is people asking why I went with the PDS or why I went with the XCW, and I think that's because you don't see as many guys racing these bikes. And I think the majority of trail riders would find that the PDS bike is very easy to ride, and I think that it gives great feel and feedback when you're cornering and on the trail of exactly where the rear end of the bike is. It's not night and day difference to a linkage bike in my opinion, but it's a fun bike to play ride on. I've enjoyed racing it the last couple months, and I plan on getting another XCW next year when this one gets a lot of time on it. So I hope that you've enjoyed my setup tips. On my website, I've got on the bikes page, I've got a very detailed setup list that kind of goes over everything that I've gone over in this video. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to ask, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks for watching.